Films in Focus with David Sterritt is underwritten by The Movie House, your destination for first-run Hollywood and independent movies, and a digital portal to the Met Opera, National Theatre Live, and special events worldwide in Millerton, New York, and on the web, themoviehouse.net.
David Sterritt is the editor-in-chief of the Quarterly Review of Film and Video, contributing writer at Cineast, film professor at the Maryland Institute College of Art, Robin Hood Radio's very own critic. We are very proud of him. He joins us weekly. The films, The Mauritanian, In and of Itself, and Two of Us. All we need are some prepositions, and we're in business here.
And you've got a sentence or a story or something
story.
like
Yeah, big story.
Well, in this case, the movies are all quite different from each other. So maybe we shouldn't make one story out of them. Maybe it should be a multi-layered tale, which I will now proceed to tell. Let's begin with The Mauritanian, which is, you guessed it, Jill, it's about somebody from Mauritania. And it's what you might call a docudrama. It's based on a very, very real case, although it's a fictionalized version with movie stars in it. For example, Jodie Foster and Benedict Cumberbatch are in it. But the main character is a guy whose name I will now mispronounce, Mohamedou Ould Salahi. And he is a real person, and he's played in the movie. His performance is one of the very best things about the movie, played by an actor named Tahir Rahim. He is a young man who was arrested in Mauritania and was whisked off on charges of being a terrorist in the post-9/11 era, whisked off to Guantanamo, the prison there, the American prison at Guantanamo Bay. And there he is, and as near as we can tell, he was not a terrorist and didn't really have anything to do with terrorists, but there's some evidence which appears to be sort of way against him. And one of the big points of the movie is that when you are whisked off to Guantanamo Bay as a terrorist, in this case from Mauritania, you don't get much of a chance to prove your innocence. And in fact, he was held there, get ready for this, for no fewer than 14 years. And during that time, yes, he was subjected to all the horrifying things that have happened to so many people in the Guantanamo prison. He was tortured and he was interrogated ruthlessly and relentlessly, and all these horrifying things happened. Yes, he did make some confessions, but then eventually, by the end of this whole thing, it was found that, yes, of course, they were extracted from him through torture, and therefore they have absolutely no validity whatever. And I won't give away the end of the movie, but let's just say that things went better for him in the end. And again, we're talking about some horrifying stuff here. 14 years this guy was locked away, and in pretty horrifying conditions a great deal of that time. But things in the end went better for him than from the 40 prisoners who are even now still in the Guantanamo Bay prison. So anyway, don't get me started. This whole thing, I think, there's been all kinds of horrific injustice perpetrated in the 9/11 era, and a lot of that injustice perpetrated at Guantanamo Bay. And this is the story of one of those people who underwent horrifying things. And what we do is we kind of jump between his experiences in the prison and the efforts of his attorney, played by Jodie Foster, and her assistant, played by Shailene Woodley, or maybe I should say her associate, to get him out of there and get him off from there, and with a prosecutor trying to get the book thrown at him, and that is the Benedict Cumberbatch character, although changes take place in the way these people are approaching the case as the movie proceeds. So that's what it's about, and I have to say that The Mauritanian has not been getting very good reviews. A lot of critics don't like it. A lot of people feel everybody seems to praise the main actor, Tahir Rahim, playing Mohamedou Ould Salahi, but and he is just fine. But a lot of the critics seem to feel that the other performances are kind of wooden. Jodie Foster is, I think, never the warmest of performers, and yeah, she comes off a bit chilly here, but then again, I think that really is the character, again, based on a real-life person. But I found the movie, again, even though a lot of critics are saying it's not a very good film, that it should be more stirring, more inspirational, more outraging than it is. I found it very effective. Yes, it's true, as one critic wrote, that there's nothing but good guys in the movie, and yes, the whole treatment of the thing is not very deep and all of that, but I just found the whole thing a very worthwhile reminder of the horrifying injustices that took place after 9/11. Yes, America was traumatized by that, but that's really no excuse. And the thing is that some of these injustices processes are still going on right now, and I just found the whole thing an excellent reminder of that, and a very dramatic and suspenseful movie. One of the things that happens in the movie is that the prisoner, Mohamedou Slahi, is writing down his experiences and passing them along to his attorney, and they eventually became a book, and it is that book upon which the movie is based. So, the whole thing is it's a docudrama. It's not real life, unfiltered, but I found it very effective and a very dramatic movie, and a movie about stuff that's really going on in the real world, unlike so many of the films that come out nowadays, and I recommend it. I think people ought to go see The Mauritanian. I was quite gripped by it from beginning to end, and I think a lot of other people will be too. It's a very, very worthwhile film. Second film today is very, very different. Couldn't be more different, in fact. It's a sort of a documentary, but it's really more of a filmed stage performance, and it's called In and of Itself. It was directed by Frank Oz, who is quite a major figure himself, but it's really the work of Derek DelGaudio, who is an unusual figure. He's a magician, and he is a storyteller, and we see his magic, and we hear his storytelling a great deal in and of Itself, which consists almost entirely of his stage act, with shots of the audience mixed in, and sometimes it's one of the features of his stage act that members of the audience come down and interact with him on the stage. So it's that sort of thing as well. And it's very unusual, and it's sort of hard to sum up in an easy way. It's mainly a long sort of a story that DelGaudio is telling. And the story is based on the question of identity. Who am I? Who are people? How do we define ourselves? How do we allow other people to define us? None of us is one thing. All of us are many things, although we can also often, and this is a part of the movie that emerges as it goes along, sometimes we can sum ourselves up in one single word or one single phrase. And is that really valid? Is that really legitimate? And in a way, I found that a kind of a contradiction in the movie that made me a little bit uncomfortable. On the one hand, the film is really meant to, and the show is meant to make us feel that, identity is a very complicated thing and all of us are many things. But on the other hand, a whole long portion of the last part of the movie is about summing up people in a single word or a single phrase that they may apply to themselves. So again, the movie, in a way, that's kind of another complication of the movie that makes it interesting and maybe even a little bit dense. On the other hand, again, I found it a little bit self-contradictory, and I suppose different viewers will have different ideas about that for themselves. Another thing that DelGaudio does in the movie, and this is my favorite aspect of it, is he does magic. And that's sometimes really conventional magic, like card tricks. Oh, there's a bunch of card tricks in it, and gee, this guy can handle the cards amazingly. And he tells the story, which may or may not be completely true, about how he learned about cards from this old gambler, and then he became an expert gambler himself, and he could manipulate the cards and cheat in gambling and make an enormous amount of money that way. But on the other hand, it was cheating, and it wasn't the right thing to do. But along the way, we're seeing him do these card manipulations, which are absolutely astounding. And they're right there. There's no camera trickery involved. So that's pretty amazing. And so we hear a lot about that, and we see this illustrated. And there's other magic in the show, too. And the last part of the show involves what might be the grandest trick of all, and that is when he reveals things or discerns things, or kind of is able to have a sort of a clairvoyant view of certain things involving members of the audience. And this appears to be absolutely uncanny. It appears to be really supernatural, although I'm sure it isn't. It reminds me of years ago I saw a mentalist do a show, and he was doing all these remarkable tricks, knowing things about people in the audience, and we were sort of surmising ways in which he might have done this. And anyway, DelGaudio's show ends up with a whole lot of that stuff in it, and it's interesting and fascinating, and at the same time you think, well, there's some trickery involved here, and I wonder what it is, and that's all sort of a lot of fun. The trouble with In and of Itself is that the last part of it, I found, gets very cloying and sentimental and sort of humanistic in an easy way, in a reductive way, and I was disappointed by that aspect of it. But hey, the parts of it where he's doing his magic and the parts of it where he's telling stories about his misspent past as a gambler and so forth and so on are really quite interesting. So I had a mixed experience watching In and of Itself. I know there are people who just think it's the most wonderful thing around, and I imagine that it is pretty wonderful for a lot of people. For me, it was semi-wonderful, or not even even quite that strong, but semi-compelling, semi-fascinating, semi-marvelous, but not quite marvelous enough to make me really recommend it wholeheartedly. If you want to see a very unusual movie, it's basically a one-person show with some other people from the audience mixed in from time to time, and have a stage experience at this time when it's almost impossible to see an actual stage show. That's a way that in and of itself really does pay off. Otherwise, I found it a mixed experience, but Delgadio is quite a remarkable performer, and I think it's very nice to have one of his major performances captured this way on film. Our final movie today, Two of Us. The original title is a French title, deux, meaning two, and it is in fact very much about two people, although there are other characters in it as well. It's directed by a very young Italian filmmaker named Filippo Meneghetti, and this is his first feature film, although he's done a number of shorts, and it has a marvelous cast. And I'll mention two of the people right away. Barbara Sukova, who is a marvelous German actress who has been around for decades and decades. She was a big star of some of the great German filmmaker Rainer Werner Fassbinder's major works. She's still around and still doing excellent work. And the other main character is played by Martine Chevalier, a French actress who is billed as Martine Chevalier de la Comédie Française. So she's a pretty major French actress. And these two, the German woman and the French woman, are the main characters. And as we learn very early in the film, they lived in an apartment building, and the apartment building is pretty ordinary, and they live across the hall from one another, but they have been carrying on, and by the way, these are both, if you're not familiar with these actresses, they are both women of a certain age. They are older women. They've been around for quite a long number of decades, and they live across the hall from each other, and for many years they have been carrying on a real passionate love affair between the two of them. Yes, they are same-sex lovers, and the thing is that nobody knows about this. It's their little secret. But now they are gotten to retirement age, and the big dream, which is especially held by the French woman of the pair, the big dream is to sell their apartments and go off and live the life they've always dreamed of living in Rome, which is a place where they visited, and now they want to go there and just spend their retirement years there and have a wonderful time. But it is very important for the French woman to tell her family about this. She has a son and a daughter and a grandchild, and she's got to tell them. None of them know about her longtime affair with her German neighbor. She's got to tell them about this and tell them that that's why she's making this break, and just sort of come out of the closet after all these years. So that is the basic setup for the movie in its early scenes. And I should give the names of the characters. The French woman is named Madeleine, and the German woman is named Nina. The thing is that Madeleine, who has got to tell her family and come out, cannot bring herself to do this. She just can't manage it. It's just too much for her. It's been a secret for too long. It's too controversial. It just goes against everything that every kind of relationship that she's had with her family. This is very unfortunate, but hey, it's a real human dilemma, and I can fully sympathize with her on all of this. So this brings a certain huge argument very early in the film between the two characters, Madeleine and Nina. Nina is very, very upset because she's very eager for them to sell their apartments and go off to Rome for the happy last phase of their lives. So she's very upset. And then something really dramatic happens, still quite early in the film, which is that Madeleine has a very devastating stroke, and for a long time is unable to speak, almost unable to move, and is shipped off by her daughter to an assisted living facility, a nursing home really, where she lives now. And the thing is that Nina, her German lover, can't just go there and see her because she's not family, and the actual family doesn't know anything, again, about this long-time relationship. So Nina is reduced to things like sneaking into Madeleine's apartment while it's empty and hanging around there and trying to figure out ways to go and see Nina in the hospital. And then Madeleine comes home, but now she's being looked after by a caretaker, and the whole thing is still such a secret. Anyway, the movie is basically an extended essay on where secrets and lies will get you, all kinds of difficulties and tangled webs. But at the same time, you have to sympathize with these women and why the whole thing is a matter of secrets and lies, because of the obvious difficulty that the family would have in understanding this and accepting all this if they did know about it. And then there's a very major subplot involving the caretaker who comes to take care of Madeline. Her name is Muriel, and she turns out to be an absolutely fascinating character in her own right, and she has a son who turns out to be very bad news for the main characters. So anyway, Two of Us is a marvelously directed, superbly acted drama. These two actresses, Barbara Sukova and Martine Chevalier, are simply excellent in their roles. So is everybody else in the cast. It's a very, very poignant family drama with all kinds of suspense and many emotional layers, and it's gorgeously, marvelously filmed by this new young filmmaker, Filippo Meneghetti, about whom I am sure we will hear very, very much more. So Two of Us has my highest recommendation. It's a marvelous, marvelous little family drama and same-sex lover drama and person of a certain age drama, and I just hope it finds a very wide audience. It's a spectacular movie and maybe the best movie I've seen so far this year. So that is my somewhat changeable story this week, Jill.
For which we thank you as ever, David Sterritt. Films in Focus, the films The Mauritanian, In and of Itself, and Two of Us.